What has brought about this sudden Russia and Ukraine war? What is Russia's interest in Ukraine? Throughout Vladimir Putin's 21 years in power, Russia has had a long relationship with Ukraine. Putin has seen Ukraine as a fraternal nation, tied to Russia by bonds of faith, family, politics, and a millennium of common history. Short of war, one of the best ways that Putin has to influence Ukraine is through Medvedchuk and his political party. So it should not be surprising that Russia's military standoff with the West has escalated in step with the crackdown against his friend. Days after President Joe Biden's inauguration, America's allies in Kiev resolved to take action against Medvedchuk, Putin's ally. The Ukrainian government began by shutting down his television channels, depriving Russia of a propaganda platform in the country. The move was praised by the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. Ukraine stated 2 weeks later, on February 19, 2021, that it had confiscated the assets of Medvedchuk's family. One of the most crucial, according to the report, is a pipeline that transports Russian oil to Europe, enriching Medvedchuk and his family, including Putin's goddaughter, Daria, and assisting in the funding of Medvedchuk's political party. Putin's reaction was first heard less than 2 days later, at 7 a.m. on February 21. The Russian Defense Ministry announced the deployment of 3,000 paratroopers to the Ukrainian border for large-scale exercises, preparing them to seize enemy structures and hold them until the arrival of the main force, according to a statement that went unnoticed. Those men were the first in a Russian military buildup that has since swelled to over 100,000 troops. In its haste to respond, the United States and its allies have dispatched plane loads of weapons to Ukraine and tens of thousands of troops to safeguard NATO's eastern frontier. The ensuing standoff has reignited Cold War tensions and brought Europe closer to a massive armed clash. Observers have raised Putin's geopolitical desire to humble the Americans, divide the Europeans, and re-establish Moscow's dominance over the regions it governed before its empire fell in 1991, in an attempt to decipher his motivations. However, the crisis' origins have been disregarded. Understanding Putin's goals requires knowledge of both his personal and political links to Ukraine, as well as his long-term goal of bringing the country under his authority. When Medvedchuk was placed under house arrest, Russian President Vladimir Putin described the attack on his proxies as an utterly apparent cleanse of the political arena, threatening to transform Ukraine into a war zone. For his closest buddy in Kiev, the subject that currently dominates headlines around the world, what does Putin want, is not a guessing game. His bond with Putin dates back to the early years of Putin's presidency, he claimed. Medvedchuk was Putin's chief of staff in Kiev, and the two frequently met at formal gatherings. Russia had all the power it wanted in Ukraine at the moment. Its economy was reliant on Russia for cheap gas and loans, and its officials had no plans to join any Western alliances. After a revolution tore their countries apart in 2014, their connection grew even stronger. That winter, protesters set up camp in Kiev Central Square, demanding that Ukrainian government battle corruption and integrate with the West. On a chilly February morning, after more than 2 months of skirmishes with police, security forces opened fire on demonstrators, killing dozens of them in the streets. The government fell apart the next day. Its leaders fled to Russia, and as their political party disintegrated, so did the Russian influence apparatus over its neighbor. In a speech in the Kremlin that spring, Putin fumed, "There is no legitimate authority in Ukraine now. I don't know who to talk to." He said the revolution was only a US-backed coup, and he replied by ordering his forces to invade. Following their quick takeover of Crimea, Russian soldiers went into eastern Ukraine's coal mining heartland, creating separatist puppet administrations in 2 of the country's largest cities. Ukraine's capital became a political battleground while the country fought back in the east. The remains of the pro-Russian establishment set out to form new political parties in Ukraine, each fighting for the votes of the previous regime's supporters. "We knew Putin didn't want long-term instability and conflict in Ukraine," says an aide to one of the Ukrainian oligarchs who financed these parties. Like previously, he wants a protectorate, a loyal administration. In Kiev, Russia's friends demanded the ability to run for politics, own enterprises, and control television networks. "This would be our compromise," Russian legislator Konstantin Zachelin said to me at the time. "In the big Ukrainian choir, Russia would have its own soloists, and they would be Russians." The United States was not interested in such a compromise, and President Barack Obama took a harsh position against Russian operatives in Kiev. Following Russia's invasion in March 2014, many of them were sanctioned, with Medvedchuk at the head of the list. Nonetheless, by the end of 2018, pro-Russian parties had made a breakthrough in Ukraine, forming the opposition platform, For Life Alliance. They held 3 television networks in Ukraine, backed by millionaires favorable to Moscow. Putin's old acquaintance Medvedchuk was the party's chairman. In our next episode, we'll continue with the history. Please subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends so that we can continue to bring you relevant and educational videos like this.